The reason is that it is all dependent upon the view objects again. It is all in the business service layer. Yes, right? We have all this ADF business components in the service layer. So we'll just try to complete this service layer today by understanding different types of concepts. We'll go in depth in understanding the complete VO architecture and even the entity objects architecture, because before going forward to the UI layer or control layer, we have to basically understand this concept of business model components. So we'll just try to create like how do we create the list of values, LOVs basically, and how do we customize the queries, which means that you already have a VO. So how do you customize that VO? Okay, how do you modify the query for the VO? You can do it based upon the view criteria. You can do it based upon the bind variables. We can even rename the requery our existing query. So there are different ways of creating it. Yeah. So we'll even try to see the most complex one in the existing functionality, which is called as dependent LOVs. And in the interview point of view, this is a very common question. It is very fresher question, but we'll find it out. Because the dependent LOVs is a concept where if you understand the whole components of view object, you will be able to understand this dependent LOVs. So we'll try to go through every component once again, so that we'll be able to understand the dependent LOVs concepts with theory and with practicals. No worries about it. I will try to go through every component in this then. And how do you perform calculations? Which means that let's say you have an employees table and you have a new attribute, same it as total salary. Okay, what you want to do is you wanted to calculate that salary plus commission into 12 months for the whole year. So how do you do it? So how do you perform calculations for every employee, for every row? So this is what about comes concept of calculation concepts and like defining a new attribute. We'll work on that also now. Okay, and how do you restrict the columns based upon the query? So we can have a restriction for columns. Like let's say you want to display only few columns in your UI. You don't want to display all the columns. So how do you restrict it? How do you make sure that you only display the required columns and hide the different the existing columns? You can work on that. And how do you change the query of the rows? So what does it basically means is like let's say you have such form. Okay, so you just you basically use a wizard based or declarative. So drag and drop to the page as a such form. So what happens is you'll be able to see that the order has been the same what we defined it in the initial levels. So how do you modify this order of the queried rows? We'll be able to see that now. And how do you restrict the query rows based upon the queries? Now before we have seen this columns, now how do we restrict the rows? Basically we have to use a programmatic view criteria, which means that we have to write a programmatic where clause and we have to restrict it. How do we do it? We'll work on that now. Then later on we'll work on understanding basically like how do you create a view criteria, and based upon this view criteria how do you create the such forms, and where do we define this view criteria? It is a very important concept because most of the client level applications will be defined upon this view criteria. So we'll be working on this, creating view criteria and defining view criteria, and how do you form the such forms based upon this view criteria. And we will try to see how do we use entity objects in a high level, because like we have something called entity states. So different architectural concepts of entity object, we'll work on that now. This is what about introduction to the different concepts in depth in VOs and EOs. So after completing all those things from tomorrow's class, we'll be working on the basically application module and programmatic approaches. Okay, first we'll try to understand all those things, and after completing all those things, what I'll do is like I'll give a sample use cases. We try to work on this for this week. So next week we'll work on that remaining things. So make sure that all the examples what I have given have been done, so that it will be very easy for you to understand the next topic.